Before the stadiums, before the screaming crowds, before the world knew his name, there was just a boy from Wolverhampton. Liam James Payne was born on August 29, 1993, in the West Midlands of England. He grew up the youngest of 3 children in a close, loving family. His father, Jeff, worked for a manufacturing company. His mother, Karen, was a nursery nurse. Life was simple, ordinary, but Liam was never just ordinary. From the moment he entered the world, Liam's journey was shaped by challenge. Born 3 weeks premature, he faced serious health complications. Doctors discovered one of his kidneys was dysfunctional. He spent much of his early childhood visiting hospitals, his days punctuated by medical tests and treatments. In later interviews, he remembered the daily injections. "I had 32 injections in my arm every morning and evening when I was little. I couldn't really run around like the other kids for a long time." But even then, resilience defined him. Setbacks weren't the end for Liam, they were simply the beginning of a climb. At school, he stood out for his energy and determination. Sports became an outlet, especially running. By the time he was 12, he was competing at a national level in track and field, representing his school and his region. His mother recalled, "He was always so determined. If he wanted something, he wouldn't stop until he got there. I think that's what carried him through everything." But athletics weren't his only passion. Music had been quietly brewing in the background. He sang around the house, mimicking artists he heard on the radio. In primary school, a music teacher recognized his perfect pitch and encouraged him to perform in front of his classmates. That encouragement planted a seed. For the first time, Liam's voice became more than a private pastime. It's easy to forget that great careers often begin in small rooms. For Liam, it was his school auditorium. No stage lights, no roaring crowd, just a shy boy and a microphone. But behind the smiles in his school photos, Liam's early years weren't without struggles. He's spoken openly about being bullied, about feeling like an outsider. "There were days when I didn't want to go in," he said. "I had a rough time at secondary school, but it pushed me to focus on what I loved. Music became my safe place." That safe place eventually expanded beyond the walls of his school. Liam joined the Pink Productions theater company, performing in local musicals and community shows. The experience gave him a taste of the stage and the thrill of connecting with an audience. By his early teens, Liam's world revolved around 2 passions, the discipline of sport and the dream of music. He rehearsed in community halls, practiced guitar at home, and still pushed himself on the track. He didn't yet know which path would shape his future, only that he was willing to work for either. And then, at the age of 14, his ambition took him somewhere unexpected, onto national television for the very first time. In 2008, he auditioned for the X Factor, a leap that would test his voice, his courage, and his resolve. Before that moment, he was still just a boy from Wolverhampton, shaped by hospital visits, determined sprints on the track, and quiet evenings practicing songs in his bedroom. Everything Liam Payne would one day become began here, in the streets, schools, and small theaters where he learned to fight for his place in the world. Every superstar starts somewhere. For Liam, it was here. In 2008, at just 14 years old, Liam Payne stood nervously backstage at the X Factor auditions. The bright lights, the cameras, the sea of strangers, it was a world away from Wolverhampton. But for Liam, this was the chance he'd been dreaming of. He walked onto the stage in a crisp white shirt, looking younger than his years, but determined. Simon Cowell, sitting in the judge's chair, asked about his age. Liam's answer drew smiles. He had a boyish charm, polite but confident. Then he began to sing, Michael Bublé's "Fly Me to the Moon." His voice was controlled, warm, already showing a maturity beyond his age. The judges were impressed, but there was hesitation. Simon leaned forward and told him, "You've got a great voice, Liam, but I think you're not quite ready for this competition. I want you to come back in a couple of years, and we'll see." It was rejection, but not the end. For Liam, it became motivation. He returned to Wolverhampton with a new plan: train, practice, and return stronger. For the next 2 years, he worked on his craft. He took singing lessons, expanded his range, and studied the performances of artists he admired. He wanted to be ready when the moment came again. That moment arrived in 2010. Now 16, Liam returned to the X Factor stage with a deeper voice, sharper style, and a confidence that came from preparation. He chose to sing Cry Me a River, a bold choice for a teenager. As soon as he began, the room changed. His delivery was polished, powerful, and precise. The audience erupted. Cheryl Cole smiled, Lewis Walsh nodded along. Even Simon looked impressed. When he finished, Simon told him, "That was absolutely brilliant. You've definitely got it." Liam was through to the next round. Through boot camp, he delivered consistent performances. The producers began to see him as a potential solo star. But then, something unexpected happened. In the final stages before the live shows, Liam didn't make it through as a soloist. He wasn't alone. 4 other boys, Harry Styles, Niall Horan, Louis Tomlinson, and Zayn Malik, were in the same position. They had each been cut, their solo dreams ending in the same moment. It was Nicole Scherzinger, alongside Simon Cowell, who saw another possibility. What if these boys weren't meant to compete against each other, but together? Liam later remembered, "We didn't know each other at all. We'd all just been knocked out, and suddenly we were being put into this group. It was strange but exciting." The 5 were called back to the stage. Simon told them, "We've decided to put you through to the next stage, as a group." They needed a name. After tossing around ideas, Harry suggested One Direction. It stuck instantly. From that day on, Liam was no longer just a contestant, he was part of something bigger. In the group, he quickly emerged as one of the strongest vocalists. His voice anchored many of their harmonies, and his steady presence earned him the role of unofficial leader in those early days. In the live shows, One Direction's performances were met with growing fan support. They didn't win, finishing 3rd behind Rebecca Ferguson and winner Matt Cardle, but victory came in a different form. Simon Cowell signed them to his label, Psycho Music, convinced they could be the next big thing. For Liam, it was the moment his years of preparation, his childhood challenges, and his determination all connected. The boy who had once been told to come back in 2 years now had a place in a band that would soon take over the world. It began on that stage, with 5 young men who didn't know each other, a name they had just chosen, and a shared dream. For Liam, the X Factor wasn't just a competition. It was the turning point that transformed his life forever. When One Direction left the X Factor stage in 2010, they didn't leave as winners, but they left with something far more powerful, a devoted, growing fan base. And a belief, shared by Simon Cowell and the boys themselves, that they could go further than anyone expected. The weeks after the show were a blur. Photo shoots, studio sessions, endless interviews. Liam found himself in London more than in Wolverhampton, adjusting to a new life that moved at lightning speed. They recorded their debut single, What Makes You Beautiful. When Liam heard the final mix, he knew it had something special. It was the kind of song you couldn't get out of your head, he recalled years later. In September 2011, it was released and exploded. It debuted at #1 in the UK, selling over 150,000 copies in its first week. Suddenly, Liam was part of the biggest new pop act in Britain. Their debut album, Up All Night, followed in November. Liam's voice was front and center on many tracks, his steady tone giving the songs a foundation. Critics noted his maturity, how he balanced the playful energy of the group with a grounded presence. Then came the tours. First small venues, then arenas, then, in what felt like no time at all, stadiums. Thousands of fans lined streets outside hotels. Airports became chaotic scenes. Liam, who just months earlier had been rehearsing in small community halls, was now facing crowds so loud he couldn't hear his own voice on stage. And the band's reach didn't stop at the UK. They broke America, a feat no British boy band had achieved in years. Their 2012 US tour sold out within minutes. Up All Night hit #1 on the Billboard 200, making them the first British group to debut at #1 with their first album. For Liam, it was exhilarating, but also overwhelming. The travel, the press, the expectations. Still, he kept his focus. Within the group, he often acted as the organizer, the one who made sure everyone knew the schedule, the set list, the plan. Fans began calling him the Band Dad, a nickname he embraced with a smile. "I just like to make sure everything was running smoothly," he admitted. "We were all so young, someone had to keep us on track." The next few years brought a run of success almost unprecedented in modern pop. 2012's Take Me Home, 2013's Midnight Memories, 2014's 4. Each album went to #1 in multiple countries. Each tour became bigger than the last. Liam co-wrote songs like Story of My Life, No Control, and Night Changes, helping shape the band's evolving sound from pure teen pop toward a more mature pop rock feel. By 2014, One Direction wasn't just a boy band, they were a global phenomenon. They topped Forbes' list of highest-earning boy bands, they set touring records, they filled stadiums from South America to Asia. And with each performance, Liam's role as a frontline vocalist solidified. His voice often opened the shows, steady and confident, setting the tone for the night. On ballads, he could deliver emotional weight. On upbeat hits, his vocals carried the energy forward. But the whirlwind pace came with its pressures. Liam admitted in interviews that the constant travel and public scrutiny could be exhausting. Yet he also spoke of the bond between the 5 members, how they relied on each other to navigate a life few could understand. "We were like brothers," he said. "We'd been thrown together into this crazy world, and we had to look out for each other." By 2015, the band had released 4 albums in 4 years, toured relentlessly, and maintained a level of fame that seemed impossible to sustain. Fans around the world knew every lyric, every inside joke, every smile from the stage. Liam Payne, the boy who had once sung in small-town school halls, was now standing in front of 80,000 people a night, his voice echoing across stadiums on every continent. This was the peak, the dream in full bloom. The years when One Direction was not just a band, but a cultural movement, and Liam was at the heart of it all. At the height of One Direction's fame, the world saw the headlines, the sold-out tours, the record-breaking albums. What they didn't always see was how each member grew, changed, and found his own voice within the machine of success. For Liam Payne, those years were a transformation. When One Direction first formed, he was often described as the sensible one, polite, prepared, careful in interviews. The nickname Band Dad followed him everywhere. But behind that was a young man learning, day by day, how to navigate a life most people could never imagine. He took that early instinct to keep things on track and turned it into quiet leadership. On stage, he was the one reminding the others of cues, transitions, and mic changes. In rehearsals, he paid attention to the details, making sure the harmonies were tight and the pacing worked. "We all had different personalities," Liam said later. "Mine was just to keep things together." But his growth went beyond logistics. He began to explore songwriting more seriously, contributing ideas and lyrics to the band's albums. By the time Midnight Memories and 4 came around, Liam had co-written more than half of their tracks. Songs like Story of My Life showed a more introspective side. No Control revealed the band's playful edge, while Night Changes captured a bittersweet maturity. Liam's fingerprints were all over them, shaping not only the melodies but the narratives the band was telling. His vocal role evolved too. Early on, Liam's smooth, steady tone often anchored the choruses. But as the years passed, he took on more dynamic parts, opening verses, delivering emotional bridges, hitting the high notes that made live performances soar. On Drag Me Down, his first line set the tone for one of their most powerful anthems. He was also learning how to manage fame. In public, Liam carried himself with warmth and approachability. He was often the one who stopped for fans, signed extra autographs, and took time to make people feel seen. In interviews, he balanced lighthearted jokes with thoughtful answers, earning respect from both fans and journalists. Still, the pace was relentless. 4 albums in 4 years meant little rest. The band was on the road for months at a time, far from home, living out of suitcases. "You wake up in a different city every day," Liam once explained. "It's amazing, but you can forget where you are. You just have to keep going." That constant movement forced him to grow up quickly. He became more protective of his health, mindful of his voice, and aware of the pressures on his mental well-being. In private, he leaned on the friendships within the band, the shared laughter backstage, the inside jokes on long flights, the quiet moments before a show. By the time Made in the AM arrived in 2015, Liam had become not just a key vocalist and songwriter, but a stabilizing force in the group. He knew when to push for perfection, when to loosen up, and when to step back and let the others take the spotlight. Looking back, he summed it up simply. "We were just 5 lads having a laugh, making music, but I think we all found out who we were along the way." For Liam, those peak years were more than just global fame. They were the years when he learned how to lead without demanding attention, to create without ego, and to stay grounded when the world around him was anything but. That growth would become essential for what came next, a moment that would change the trajectory of all their lives. Because in 2016, for the first time in years, One Direction's future was uncertain. By early 2016, One Direction had spent 5 years living at full speed. 5 albums, 4 world tours, hundreds of millions of records sold. Countless airport arrivals met by screaming fans. But behind the glittering statistics, the pace was becoming impossible to maintain. In late 2015, after releasing Made in the AM, the band announced they would take an extended break. It was framed as a hiatus, time to rest, focus on personal projects, and recharge. But for fans, it felt like the end of an era. For Liam, the news was bittersweet. He loved performing with the band, but he also knew they all needed space. "We'd been going non-stop since the X Factor," he later said. "We needed a break to figure out who we were outside of all this." The final performance before the hiatus came on the X Factor stage in December 2015, a full circle moment. They sang History, a song Liam had co-written. The lyrics, "You and me got a whole lot of history," carried extra weight. There were smiles, but also tears in the eyes of fans and band members alike. When the lights went down that night, Liam stepped away from the whirlwind that had defined his late teens. For the first time in years, he had no tour dates, no recording schedule, no interviews lined up. The quiet was strange. In interviews, he admitted it was difficult to adjust. "I'd gone from constant chaos to suddenly having time to think, and when you've been running that fast, stopping is hard." But he also saw it as an opportunity, a chance to explore the creative side of himself that had been limited by the pace of 1D's machine. He began writing new music, experimenting with sounds far from the band's pop rock style. Hip-hop beats, R&B melodies, more mature lyrics. He spent time in Los Angeles, working with producers and songwriters who challenged him to push his voice in new directions. Away from the cameras, he was figuring out what Liam Payne's music sounded like without the other 4 voices beside him. The hiatus also gave him space to grow personally. He kept in touch with the band, but their lives began moving in different directions. Solo projects, acting roles, family commitments. Still, the bond was there. "No matter what, we'll always have that shared history," he said. For Liam, the end of One Direction's non-stop chapter wasn't the end of his story. It was the start of something more uncertain, but also more personal. The boy who had been the band dad was now entirely responsible for his own career. The safety net of the group was gone. The world would hear his voice alone and decide for themselves what they thought of it. That was daunting. But if Liam's life had taught him anything, from his hospital days as a child to being told come back in 2 years at his first X Factor audition, it was that challenges were there to be met. And so, in 2017, Liam Payne stepped into the next chapter of his life, as a solo artist. In May 2017, Liam Payne's voice returned to the charts, but this time it was on its own. His debut solo single, Strip That Down, announced to the world that the former band dad of One Direction was stepping into new territory. The track was an unexpected move for many fans. Built on a heavy bass line and hip-hop influences, it leaned into an R&B swagger far removed from One Direction's polished pop rock. Featuring rapper Quavo from Migos, the song carried a confident, club-ready energy. Liam co-wrote it with Ed Sheeran and Steve Mack, and the lyrics made a subtle nod to his past. "You know, I used to be in 1D. Now I'm out, free." It was both a wink and a declaration. This was a new chapter. The gamble paid off. Strip That Down peaked at number 3 on the UK singles chart, went triple platinum in the UK, quadruple platinum in the US, and sold millions worldwide. For Liam, it was validation that he could stand on his own. Over the next 2 years, he experimented with different sounds and collaborators. In early 2018, he teamed up with Rita Ora for For You, the soaring ballad featured in 50 Shades Freed. The song became an international hit, reaching the top 10 in multiple countries. Later that year, he worked with Jonas Blue and Lennon Stella on Polaroid, a warm, romantic dance track that showed his lighter side. Unlike in One Direction, Liam now had complete creative freedom. That freedom was exciting, but it also came with pressure. He was exploring who he was as an artist, not just what fans expected him to be. In December 2019, he released his debut album, LP1. It was a collection of the singles he'd released since 2017 alongside new material, spanning R&B, pop, and dance. Critics were mixed. Some praised his willingness to experiment, others questioned the album's cohesion. But for Liam, LP1 was a milestone. It represented 2 years of finding his sound in real time. "I didn't want to be stuck in one box," he explained. "I've always loved different styles of music, and I wanted to try them all." Alongside his recorded work, Liam became a fixture at award shows and major events. He performed at the 2019 BAFTAs, delivering a dramatic rendition of Waiting for a Miracle suspended above the stage. He sang at the Dubai Globe Soccer Awards, the MTV EMAs, and charity concerts across the world. But success as a solo artist wasn't just about the charts. It was also about survival in a post-1D landscape where comparisons were inevitable. Liam navigated that with honesty, speaking openly about the pressures of fame, his struggles with mental health, and the difficulty of being constantly in the public eye. "It's a lot to handle sometimes," he admitted, "but I'm proud of what I've done and the people I've worked with. I'm still learning." In the years that followed, Liam's releases reflected a willingness to keep evolving. Tracks like Stack It Up, with rapper A Boogie with the Hoodie, leaned back into hip-hop. Songs like Sunshine, from the animated film Ron's Gone Wrong, captured a more playful, family-friendly tone. He showed he could adapt, shifting between club beats, acoustic ballads, and soundtrack pop with ease. By 2021 and 2022, Liam was balancing music with other creative ventures, live-streamed shows, charity partnerships, and behind-the-scenes work on future projects. His audience had grown up with him, and his career was no longer about chasing chart positions alone, but about building a body of work he could stand behind. For Liam Payne, the solo years weren't a rejection of his One Direction past. They were a continuation of the drive that had carried him from Wolverhampton to the world stage. A willingness to take risks, a voice that could adapt and evolve, and a determination to keep creating, no matter where the journey led. The next step in that journey would take him beyond music alone, into fashion, public image, and new creative worlds. As Liam Payne's solo career unfolded, so too did another side of his public identity, one shaped not just by his voice, but by his image. From his earliest days in One Direction, Liam's style was understated. Checked shirts, casual hoodies, trainers, the look of a teenager who just stepped off a suburban street. But fame has a way of opening new doors, and Liam walked through them with curiosity. By the mid-2010s, his style had sharpened. Slim-fit suits on red carpets, leather jackets for television appearances, monochrome looks during live performances. He embraced fashion as another form of self-expression, evolving from boy next door to polished performer. One of his boldest moves came in 2019, when he was announced as a global ambassador for Hugo Boss. The campaign was sleek, confident, and sensual, pairing Liam with model Stella Maxwell for striking black and white photographs. The images showed a new side of him, one that was more daring, more mature. "Fashion's another way to tell a story," he said in an interview. "It's about finding a look that says something about where you are in life." Liam's fashion choices often blended classic tailoring with streetwear influences, designer sneakers paired with crisp blazers, or luxury coats thrown over casual tees. He wasn't afraid of bold colors or statement pieces, yet still kept a sense of ease. But public image wasn't just about clothes. It was about presence. Liam had a natural warmth in interviews, able to switch from quick jokes to thoughtful reflection in a heartbeat. That charm carried him onto television shows, award stages, and even acting projects. In 2018, he appeared on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon to perform For You with Rita Ora, commanding the stage with a cool, effortless energy. He sang on The Graham Norton Show, brought acoustic performances to radio studios, and delivered stripped-down renditions of hits for online sessions that showcased his vocal range. Film work also found its way into his career, not as a full-time actor, but as a contributor to soundtracks. For You anchored a major motion picture. Sunshine brought his voice into the world of animation, paired with bright visuals and a lighter tone that reached younger audiences. Liam's charitable side played a role in his public image too. He supported causes ranging from UNICEF to comic relief, often lending his time and performances to raise funds and awareness. In 2020, during the pandemic, he performed in virtual concerts to support frontline workers and global relief efforts. Through all of it, he remained aware of how he was perceived. The scrutiny that came with fame wasn't always easy, but he learned to navigate it, embracing authenticity, admitting mistakes, and connecting directly with fans through social media. "I think people can tell when you're being real," he once said. "I just try to be myself, whether that's in music, in fashion, or just in life." By the early 2020s, Liam had built a public persona that was multifaceted. The singer with a voice that could shift from ballad to banger, the style-conscious ambassador for global brands, the relatable figure who could laugh at himself in an interview one day and speak seriously about mental health the next. It was a balancing act, but one Liam had learned to perform well, and it kept him not just relevant, but respected in an industry where both style and substance matter. The story of Liam Payne wasn't over, and his influence stretched beyond his own work into the legacy of a band that had changed the course of pop culture. More than a decade after a shy teenager from Wolverhampton first stepped onto the X Factor stage, Liam Payne's story is still unfolding. His legacy is inseparable from One Direction's. The band became one of the most successful musical acts of the 21st century, selling over 200 million records, topping charts in more than 30 countries, and redefining what a boy band could be in the modern era. Within that legacy, Liam's contributions were unmistakable. His voice, steady, versatile, and warm, anchored countless songs. His songwriting helped shape some of the group's most beloved tracks, and his presence, often behind the scenes, kept the wheels turning during years of relentless touring and recording. But his influence extends beyond the band's achievements. For a generation of fans, Liam represented reliability, the one who remembered the lyrics, hit his notes, and made time for a handshake or a smile in the chaos. His professionalism set a standard for young artists stepping into the industry. As a solo artist, he carved a path that was uniquely his own. While some peers leaned fully into pop or rock, Liam explored R&B, hip-hop, EDM, and ballads, refusing to be boxed in. That willingness to experiment meant his catalog was as varied as his influences, showing a creative restlessness that kept his sound fresh. In interviews, he's been candid about the highs and lows of fame. His openness about mental health and personal struggles resonated deeply with fans who had grown up alongside him. It showed that the boy on stage was human, and that even in a life of chart success and brand deals, vulnerability had a place. By the mid-2020s, Liam had evolved into an artist who was as comfortable in a recording studio as he was fronting a fashion campaign or speaking at a charity event. His work reached millions, but his most loyal audience remained the fans who had been there from the beginning, the ones who knew every lyric, every note, every chapter of his story. He once said, "One Direction was a beautiful time in my life, but it's not the only chapter. I'm still writing the rest." That rest is still unwritten, and perhaps that's what makes his legacy so compelling. It's not a closed book, but an ongoing narrative, one that blends music, personal growth, and the lessons of a career that began in a small town and exploded onto the world stage. For now, Liam Payne stands as a symbol of a cultural phenomenon. His journey, from a boy with a dream to a man with a legacy, is proof that resilience, hard work, and heart can take you further than you ever imagined. And as long as there are fans singing his songs back to him, the story will never truly be over. In quiet gratitude, to the fans who cheered from the very beginning, who sang along in living rooms and stadiums, who held Liam close in your hearts, you've carried his story with love. Liam Payne's journey, from a boy with a dream in Wolverhampton to a global star, was woven through every melody you sang. You witnessed his courage, his evolution, his willingness to stand alone when the music paused. His legacy is more than hits or headlines. It's in the warmth of his voice, the depth of his lyrics, the generosity he showed quietly behind the scenes. It lives on in the songs he wrote, the performances he gave, and, most of all, in the memories you still hold. Liam's passing on October 16, 2024, in Buenos Aires, took him from us too soon. The loss echoes far beyond that single tragic moment, a reminder of the light he brought into so many lives. But stories don't end with a final note. There are hidden chapters, moments unseen, truths that shaped who he was, beyond the spotlight. In the next documentary, we'll explore those stories with honesty and respect. For now, thank you. For every chorus, every tribute, every tear shed at the thought of his smile, his song. Liam's music, his kindness, and his spirit live on with you, as a fan, as a friend, as the chorus that carries him forward.
You're one of us. Stay curious, stay brave. Like, subscribe, and never miss a twist.